22 days. That's how long the Senate has to pass the Clarity Act before it recesses on August 7th. And if that clock runs out, XRP's next major price catalyst goes dark for months. This is Senate clock. And most people covering this story don't understand what's actually being counted down. Here's what that actually means for you. This isn't a vague regulation is coming story. This is a specific countable deadline with a specific vote math problem behind it. And the math right now doesn't work. Let's start with the numbers because they tell you more than any headline will. Republicans hold 53 Senate seats. Two of those votes, Hawley and Paul, are expected to vote no. That drops the working Republican base to 51. Think of the 60-vote threshold as the Senate's built-in supermajority requirement for most major legislation. It exists specifically to force compromise instead of one-party rule. To clear it, this bill needs at least 9 Democratic votes crossing over. Right now, only 2 Democrats are on record supporting it, Gallego and Also Brooks, and both have publicly called their support conditional. In plain terms, the bill is 9 votes short, with only 2 of those 9 locked in and a hard deadline closing in fast. So what's actually blocking the other 7? 3 separate disputes, and each one is real, not manufactured drama. First, an ethics fight. President Trump disclosed over $1.4 billion in crypto-related income, and that disclosure has raised conflict of interest concerns among Democrats who don't want to hand regulatory clarity to an industry the president is personally profiting from. Second, a law enforcement dispute. Section 604 of the bill, as written, is opposed by the National District Attorneys Association, who argue it would impair active criminal investigations into crypto-related fraud. Third, a stablecoin yield dispute. Lawmakers are still fighting over whether stablecoin platforms should be allowed to offer interest-equivalent rewards to holders, a structural question that touches nearly every major exchange. Look at the numbers on how fast confidence is dropping. A month ago, prediction markets priced 2026 passage at 74%. Today, that number sits at 48%, and it specifically dropped to 39% right after the Trump disclosure story broke. That's not noise. That's the market pricing in exactly the kind of gridlock we just walked through. Here's the part they aren't telling you. A missed deadline doesn't necessarily mean a dead bill. Congress can revisit stalled legislation after a recess. But every month of delay pushes institutional capital further into a holding pattern, and that holding pattern has a name. I covered this exact mechanism in the last video, BlackRock's entry lock. If you haven't watched that one, the short version is this. BlackRock's legal team needs a finalized regulatory rulebook before they'll custody a new digital asset with full institutional confidence, and the Clarity Act is a core piece of that rulebook. In plain terms, this Senate vote isn't just a legislative story. It's one of the direct gates standing between XRP and the kind of institutional capital that moves markets. Now, here's what I want you to actually sit with for a second, because this is the part most coverage skips entirely. While Washington argues over Section 604 and stablecoin yield, well-capitalized firms are not waiting around for permission. They're already building custody relationships, banking infrastructure, and product pipelines ahead of legal clarity, treating regulatory ambiguity as a cost of being early, not a reason to stay out. Strip away the institutional language, and here is what is actually happening. The biggest players are positioning now, so they're ready to move the second this bill clears, while smaller, less capitalized competitors are stuck choosing between investing blind or falling behind. That's the real stratification happening in this market right now, and it has nothing to do with price charts. Most people hear the bill is stalled and assume nothing is happening. Something is always happening. It's just happening in law firms and compliance departments instead of on a trading screen. Let's talk about what happens on each side of this deadline, because both outcomes matter. If the bill clears the Senate before August 7th, even narrowly, it removes one of BlackRock's stated waiting conditions and removes the single largest source of institutional hesitation across the entire digital asset space, not just XRP. If it misses the deadline, it doesn't die, but it loses momentum, loses this specific vote coalition, and re-enters a queue behind whatever the Senate prioritizes when it returns from recess in September. In plain terms, A pass before August 7th accelerates everything we've been tracking. A miss doesn't end the story, but it adds real months to every timeline connected to it. Put simply, the calendar itself is now a market variable. Whether traders are watching it or not, let's go one level deeper on the piece most people misunderstand. Section 604. Think of Section 604 as the part of the bill that redraws which federal agency has jurisdiction over certain crypto related enforcement actions. Prosecutors are worried it could create gaps where ongoing fraud cases lose their legal footing mid investigation. That's not a partisan objection. That's a working law enforcement objection, which is exactly why it's proven harder to negotiate away than the ethics dispute. Here's the part that actually matters for your position as a holder. This specific fight is the one most likely to get resolved through a narrow amendment rather than a full rewrite, because both sides broadly agree on the goal, just not the current language. If you're tracking one single data point over the next 3 weeks, make it this one. Now let's talk tactically about what this means for how you should actually be reading the news over the next 22 days. Don't treat every senator's public statement as a signal. Treat commitments as the only real signal. A senator saying they're reviewing the bill is not the same as a senator saying they'll vote yes. Only count hard commitments toward that 9-vote threshold. Don't assume a missed deadline is bearish and a past deadline is bullish in isolation. Both outcomes have already been partially priced in by the markets that matter, and the more important signal is the vote count itself, not the up or down outcome. Watch whether any additional Democratic senators publicly commit. Every name beyond Gallego and also Brooks moves this bill closer to the threshold. Watch whether the Section 604 law enforcement language gets amended. That's the most fixable of the 3 disputes, and a fix there could unlock several votes at once. And watch the polymarket probability itself. It's a faster moving signal than most news coverage, and it's already told us more about this bill's real odds than any single senator's public statement has. In plain terms, track the vote count, the Section 604 language, and the prediction market, and you'll know where this bill actually stands faster than most financial media will report it. The data proves the bottleneck isn't XRP. It isn't demand. It isn't even really about crypto specifically. It's 9 votes, 3 disputes, and 22 days on a Senate calendar that doesn't care how ready the market already is.